Advocate Mthunzi Mhaga, joins us right now, and he speaks on behalf of the NPA. Advocate Mhaga, thanks for your time. Welcome to 702 one more time.
To your listeners, thanks for having me.
I really appreciate your time. Firstly, of course, the extradition must be a feather on your cap, rather, and I suppose another star on your epaulette. You do feel some element of pride about that, but the battle is yet to be won of getting the appeal waved towards your side. How far is that? But most importantly, wasn't it counterproductive to get him out, only to try to get him back into the country?
The difficulty, Thabo, is that Home Affairs ran the process of facilitating his departure from the country. There were engagements at an operational and a strategic level with Home Affairs because we are a government that talks to itself. Unfortunately, he is not a fugitive from justice. He was cleared by a court of law. And therefore he could not be prevented from leaving the country. Secondly, the presence in the country was undesirable because he was illegal in the country, and therefore we could not prevent his departure. It has a bearing on the appeal insofar as if we succeed in the SCA, we would have to extradite him back to South Africa, unlike a situation where if he was in the country, a committal warrant would be obtained if there is an order that he should be convicted or sent to jail whatsoever. But the process is that an appeal process has kick-started in that we requested the judge who presided over his acquittal judgment to clarify certain factual findings in order for us to finalize our questions of law that we will be asking her to reserve for consideration by the SCA.
And which are those, if you don't mind, one or two, just high level?
We take the view, firmly so, that the Honorable Judge, in acquitting Omotoso, misdirected herself in applying the law to the facts. There was not much attempt made to evaluate the evidence in respect of each witness who testified on behalf of the state. We then take his view that in applying the law in a number of instances, when we talk to similar fact evidence, the SCA may arrive at a different conclusion.
And having said that, you don't foresee any difficulties with getting him back into the country, should you be successful?
We have an extradition treaty with Nigeria that was signed in 2002 and ratified in 2004. We hope that we will not have hurdles to navigate that much, given our success rate in extraditing people to South Africa. You will remember that there is a trial of asbestos in Bloemfontein in respect of Cholota, who was successfully extradited from the United States. We brought Shrin Diwane from the UK. Bushiri's extradition was successful partly in respect of 3 charges, though he's still appealing.
Yeah, notwithstanding various hurdles, time, postponements, and I would assume going with that sizable resources to get that done.
Of course, it's costly, but it's worth it.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that, I mean, those hurdles, I suppose, could have been short-circuited somehow. But lastly, before I say goodbye to you, and I know that we've just grabbed you out of the meeting quickly to have this chat with us, I want to release you as soon as possible. There's a concern, if you don't mind, allow me just to indulge me for a second. The Justice for Cwecwe issue, and that's just a bit of a concern, if you don't mind, Advocate Mhaga. Why do you drop the charges? Do you intend on reinstating them? What's the latest on that?
A point of correction, Thabo. The charges have not been dropped. You only dropped charges when they were placed before the court. So in this instance, a police docket was presented to prosecutors in Matatiele, and upon interviewing the minor girl and an examination conducted by medical practitioners, interview with a forensic social worker, the prosecutors concluded that there is no evidence of sexual assault or rape, and there are no implicated persons, and therefore the charges could not be sustained if the matter were to be taken to court. They took a decision to decline and returned the docket to the police officers. Of course, the police officers decided to pursue the matter in terms of investigations, and on Friday they returned the docket or resubmitted it to the Director of Public Prosecutions in Mthatha, which is oversees lower court prosecutors. We don't know what is contained in that docket at the moment because they only started looking at it today. But the decision of November 2024 still stands.
And I suppose working very close to the police, we will hear from you about that, as you would imagine, the importance of the case and how it has shaken the nation. Advocate Mhaga, thanks for your time one more time, and let's chat very soon.
Thank you, my brother.
Advocate Mthunzi Mhaga of the NPA. It's 17 minutes to 11 o'clock. Still on that Timothy Omotoso note, we then speak to Bafana Khumalo's Executive Director at Sonke Gender Justice. As you would remember that this matter, especially the one that he was charged with, where he got a very shocking acquittal, had to do with gender issues. Thus, we've invited Bafana Khumalo to come and help us with these issues. Mr. Khumalo, thanks for your time. Welcome to 702. Good morning. I hope you're well.
Thank you, Thabo, and for inviting us, and morning to your listeners.
Your disappointments on the acquittal of the controversial Timothy Omotoso have been well registered publicly. But where to from here as the NPA contemplates or has started the process of the appeal?
Well, Thabo, we are at a loss as to how this matter is going to be appealed. I heard Advocate Mhaga's arguments, which are cogent in terms of the legal argument. The bigger question for us is, why did this case get botched in the first place? We had a strong case. We had young women who came forward, who were brave to tell, the court and the whole world, as it were, who made themselves vulnerable by revisiting their trauma of what was visited on them by this man, and spent 8 years, waiting for justice. 8 years later, they are nowhere near seeing justice and closure to the trauma that they have gone through. And I listened to the NPA, in engagement with parliamentarians last week, Friday or Thursday. I don't feel comfortable as I sit here that, in fact, we have an NPA that is caring, that is cognizant of the gravity of the pain that these young women have gone through. And it's really worrying for us. What does it mean for society? What does it mean for other young women who are exposed to this kind of violation? Should they come forward and report? What would be the point when a case like this, which was very clear, had lots of evidence adduced, and yet was botched by those that we trust to do justice? So really, it raises a lot of questions, and it really makes us comfortable.
Yeah, and I want us to touch on that a little bit more because I'm interested in knowing your next steps as to what do you intend doing to petition the NPA or Parliament or the powers that be in order to not just to resuscitate the case, but to give it more oomph, better attention that it deserves. Because we do remember that the judge's ruling was also scathing on the NPA and mentioning issues of the definition of rape not being well understood as well. Allow me to ask a bit of a nuanced question as a gender activist. some of Omotoso's co-accused were females, Lusanda Sulani and Zugiswa Sito. And they were also not found guilty on those 32 charges, as we now know. I am just wondering, those who are still supporting Omotoso in this instance, and his congregation and his supporters, in your view, what fuels that? Because in an ideal world, one would think that there would be not just camaraderie, but at worst, solidarity as far as this gender-sensitive case is concerned.
Well, Thabo, that's a vexing question because, as you know, I always make a point that we live in a patriarchal society. It's very sad how patriarchy co-opts even women basically to bolster and protect patriarchy. It's a sad story that in court, we saw many women who were basically protecting a perpetrator, an alleged perpetrator of violence against women. But this is not new, as we all know. We have seen this before with other leaders in our country. And my argument is it's very straightforward. Patriarchy has indeed managed to hoodwink all of us to think, men have to be protected at all costs, even when we are found wanting. It's even worse when you are talking about strong men, men of power, men of influence. You will have those that will always be falling all over to make sure that they protect those that they consider to be, powerful men. It's a very sad case, of course, but this is the reality that confronts us, and it's not isolated to the case, as I say.
Yeah.
Many others.
This, as an activist, this is squarely on your desk, right? And as an institution as well of government, this is squarely on your... Where to from here? What are you going to do as the gender justice to, one, not just raise awareness, but to really shake the tree, to move beyond rhetoric? And I'm not blaming you at all, and I'm not in any way attempting to point the finger at you. It's Omotoso who did this. There's a thorough understanding of that. He must take the heat. There's an NPA, as you rightly said, that perhaps didn't handle this appropriately. But there's also an issue of gender that has to be addressed in the country. And people may even be despondent and argue that we have been here so many times. Omotoso's case is one of many that have not been publicized at all. Where are the wins to give the victims a bit of hope? What are the plans that are perhaps afoot to take the struggle a bit further? Or else it appears as though we will all become numb and these will just become platitudes. And by these, I mean gender justice issues and women rights, and they'll just become platitudes that are rolling off our tongues for political and social convenience. Bafana Khumalo.
Well, there are at least three things that we will be doing, Thabo, and this is not just us as Sonke Gender Justice, but our partners in civil society. One, we will be holding the NPA accountable by monitoring the commitments that they have made. It's the right thing that they are appealing. Of course, we want them to proceed with that to make sure that, at least for ensuring that our jurisprudence can address these matters going forward, whatever was wrong in the application of the law is corrected. So we'll hold them accountable. I hope they will not now say, well, the man has gone, it's a moot point, but they will sustain that. And I'm pleased that Ms. Advocate Mhaga said, if indeed the appeal court does rule in their favor, they will exercise the proceedings to bring him back to the country. Because we do think that there needs to be accountability. Secondly, we will also monitor. The NPA director has assured us that the performance of the prosecutors, which was found wanting, and actually the judge was scathing and it's not one team of prosecutors, which is also concerning. You know that there was a prosecutor who set up a WhatsApp group, put all the people who were going to go to court, began to almost influence how they should be giving evidence. I've never heard of anything like that anywhere. Now, why a prosecutor would do that really begs, boggles the mind. And we hope that in that investigation, all these things will be ventilated so that there's accountability for the failures of the system in that regard. And those that took over, why is it that the judge has been so scathing about things that were expected of them to do as the lawyers of the people, and they did not do them? So we would like to see what that report will say. But thirdly, you may know, Thabo, that SONKA is part of what we call Men Engage, which is a global consortium, and we have a presence in Africa in almost 25 countries. We have partners in Nigeria. We are going to be sharing this information with them, because the fact that Omotoso has gone to Nigeria, where we have means of also mobilizing those where he has gone to, so that they also continue to give watch on what he is doing. What we know with perpetrators is that they don't do this in isolation. You know, it means there's a culture of doing these things.
Certainly.
So we'll be briefing our partners in Nigeria with full information so that they begin to take up advocacy in Nigeria, so that there's no room for this man to simply escape as just a church leader.
So you spoke of the culture of doing this, and I concur with you. And there is an element of impunity that goes with that culture as well. And Omotoso's acquittal may perpetuate that trend. And whilst the NPA can afford to be reactive as a gender justice institute, you can afford to be proactive through your initiatives. Do you have anything in mind, or planning, or strategic in any way that seeks to put a spotlight on these exploitative, abusive, and nefarious characters masquerading as prophets, priests, and men of the cloth, preying on vulnerable women? Because many of them are out there, and his acquittal, Omotoso's acquittal, may have just given them a stamp of approval to continue.
Yeah, Thabo, you're raising a very critical point. You may be aware there's another prominent faith leader who is in court for almost similar things.
Yeah.
It's good to also acknowledge that there were some cases, I think one in Mpumalanga, where the court have ruled, against that leader, and I think another one in Limpopo. So we do need, I think, as society to say, how do we consistently support efforts by organizations like the Commission for Religion and Linguistic Communities? Because the sad part, Thabo, is that CRL did an investigation which was thorough.
Yes.
They produced a report, took it to Parliament with very thoroughgoing recommendations, which were meant to ensure that there's proper accountability within this sector. Now, you must ask me if anything has happened to that, including the parliamentarians that were complaining last week about the NPA rule. We also need to put a spotlight on why is it that our leaders in Parliament, when recommendations are made by state institutions on such critical matters, nothing happens to those reports.
Yeah, Bafana Khumalo, sadly we'll have to leave it at that. He is co-executive director at SONKA Gender Justice, 2 minutes to 11 o'clock.